she's been an artist.
Don't you know enough about me already?
Well,
This is Under the Hat, where we interview Sarah Poff.
I'd like to welcome in the audience to Underneath the Hat, where we get to know a little bit more about Sarah Poff, my mom. She's been an artist.
Don't you know enough about me already?
Well, I don't know everything, but part of the joy of internet and YouTube and the things that you're involved in is people like knowing more of the history and the story of you.
Okay.
It's a motivational, and even your son gets inspired by you now and then. So we thought
Good to know.
You do. So we thought we'd get together and interview because we might as well try new things because we've done that how many times in our life, from drip art to making eggs on the Girl Scout can thing to who knows what. Talking about your art and the way it's impacted the community, from being an art teacher to other things, is what we thought we'd get into. Under the Hat was my idea. I'm the
I love it.
guy. We may change it, but you wear hats.
You should tell them, or I should tell them why under the hat.
Well, you start and I'll add.
That's a good way to do it. Well, I just really like wearing hats. I have ever since I was a girl. You had to wear them back then. And then I just continued to wear them. And then my father, when he and mother were in later years, they moved in with my husband and me. And Dad always wanted me, especially after Mom was gone, he always wanted to know what I was doing. Once Facebook came to me, he wanted to know where I was and what I was doing when my husband and I would go places. And I got tired of posting my face all over Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I took my hat that I always had on, I threw my hat on the dash, and then my friend named Betty, she says, well, why don't you just call it the Hat on the Dash? And so now I have a Facebook group, and we have lots of fun with posting where the hats are going, the adventures of the hats.
Mm. Well, that's just the story you came up along the way. I, being the son, have seen the hats that you have worn in my life, from mom to teacher to art trainer to janitor to all the things. So that you've worn a lot of hats, and even in your art, you've worn so many hats. Because I know your favorite is more of the model magic clay stuff, but you have skills everywhere, and you're so adaptable that you've just worn so many hats. So that being said, and I know you've done probably the elevator pitch several times, but what got you into art?
What got me into art? Well, what time in life was that?
Yes.
I knew you would say that, son.
Mm-hmm.
So, my mom, she was a second grade teacher, and she loved arts and crafts. Of course, back in the 1960s, there weren't as many things available for the average person to purchase. You had to have a license to purchase this or that. And so we did have some things, and Mom, I always liked the third dimension, do sculptures. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite places to start with that was we had cheese. Back in the day, we would get our cheddar cheese in that little package with the wax on it. And then we would take it off and we would argue about who got to have the cheddar cheese wax to mold out of. So that was what I made my first sculptures out of. And then I wanted to try along the way. I did ceramics and all, of course, in college, because that's what it was required to. And then along the way, I learned about model magic at one of those art teacher meetings. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool stuff. So I came forward, and do you know, I actually sculpted a piece. We'll have to talk about that one of these times.
For sure.
I sculpted a piece. It took me about 60 hours to actually put it together. I don't have availability for, a huge big kiln or time, or, I don't have the metals that people do for the bigger sculptures. So mine's about like this, and I used model magic. And do you know what? I was shocked to death when I actually won an award from the National DAR. I think that was in 2012.
Was it that long ago?
It was that long ago. It was that long ago.
Yeah.
Now, what got me into folk art? That's another question.
Yeah, if you want to go there next, it surprises me that bread dough didn't even make the list.
Oh my gosh! Bread dough!
That is a family thing that we have generationally, not just with me and my mom, but me and her mom, and her and her mom.
These stories are so doggone deep. I don't know what to do.
Well, that's why we made a whole series.
Well, when I was in high school, I told you about the cheese. Well, Mom always liked to have a craft to do. You know, she was always doing something with crafts, and she wanted to make Christmas presents because that's what you did in the 1960s. At least in my family, you made Christmas presents. And so I was in art class, and back then the juniors would make art for the senior prom. And so my high school art teacher, he came up with this recipe, and mushrooms were all the rage. Make this and that and something else with mushrooms. So we made mushrooms. You know, it was an enchanted forest kind of theme. We made mushrooms and we put them on a little piece of driftwood. We lived down there by that Mississippi River. There's lots of driftwood down there. And so we did that, and I brought that recipe home to Mom. She was thrilled because all it takes is white bread. Now we're talking about loaf bread, white bread, and Elmer's glue, and then you put a little food coloring in it. So you don't even have to paint the stuff.
Right.
And it lasts quite a while. Now sometimes you do have to store it in the refrigerator, or it does have that, I can smell that smell now. Sometimes when she didn't, you can too, right? And so what my mom did is then she started making all kinds of miniatures. We did start out with the mushrooms.
Oh my goodness.
And then the first craft show we went to was Land Between the Lakes over in Paris, Tennessee area. And we saw roses. Someone had roses they had made out of that. Mom got some, and we started learning how. And the rest is history. I mean, she sold...
So much history.
Yeah, so much history. You're even part of that history. So back when he was born, I went to a craft show the Saturday night before he was born. Well, I guess it was the Friday. It was just Friday. And
I don't remember.
I know you don't remember. But I carried boxes the day before he was born out of the craft show. And then I had him, and then the next week we had another craft show because it was in November. And he was in a craft box. Mother had spray painted a craft box, and we were in an old-timey house in Charleston, Missouri. And here lays the baby right under the tree with all the ornaments.
Oh, yeah.
So you got your start in crafts really quickly. The mother made all kinds of additional money. She and Dad were teachers, but they had additional money, and they would come and do a Texas tour, we called them. They'd come down there on their summer vacation, and Mom would sign up for craft shows. That's back when craft shows were really good. So some years she made $10,000 with that craft shows.
Yeah, the tax bracket changed a few times, if I remember.
Oh, yes.
Gramps arguing a few times that they made too much money. They always had a side hustle, which was amazing, and I think that goes back to the theme of hats. I mean, we've had so many side hustles along the way, and art has been one.
Right. You remember helping me with the art? And you earned some
Which
money?
one?
Which one?
My default, I'm going to sneak in a story in her show, but we would
change this water.
We should change the water.
Chairs.
But we had several different things that we would do for craft shows once I kind of got of age, and I got to an age and a strength that I could do the button maker. So I would sell buttons. And you younger kids may not understand what a button is. It's a round circle that has a pin that you put on things. But I would take gift wrapping paper and stickers, and I would sell them for $1 a piece, and I made some pretty good money. But my crown achievement was this elderly lady was just walking down the way, and I was just trying to sell anybody I could. And she walked over, and I did my pitch, and she's like, I don't know. So I just worked harder on my pitch, and finally I convinced her to buy a couple for her grandkids. And that was my crowning achievement, was selling buttons.
I forgot about that story.
Yeah,
that was a fun one.
but that was you hit it off quick, both to me and Mary Ellen, and you're like, you can sell things here too and have fun, and the little knickknacks we got at different shows.
And do you know where I got my button maker?
I don't really, I think I remember, but I'm not
I guess
sure.
you were too young back then too.
Maybe.
So when I graduated from college, and I wanted something to,
Okay.
Yeah, I got the button maker when I graduated from college. That's what your grandparents on the pop side bought was the button maker.
Yeah. Now we've been talking about the Tucker side, where she comes from, and the Pop side, not as creative, but still knew the value of diversification.
They did.
My grandmother on that side loved sewing and materials so much.
She did.
Just kind of interesting.
And they were probably more your creative writing and intellectual. We found some of her writings afterwards that were very in depth. They certainly were.
But so we did snake trail a little bit, and we a little bit of why you got into art, how you got into art, and 3D is your favorite. And,
Oh yes.
I remember you complaining a little bit about college classes that it almost killed a little bit of your love because of having to do so much ceramics.
Oh my golly, gee, yes, I had to do, just art in general. So one semester I did 4 courses, 4 3-hour courses in art. One was art history, so that wasn't too bad mixed in with the others. But then I had ceramics, and then I had sculpture, and then I had drawing, all in the same semester. So it didn't matter where I was, and those are, lab classes. I had to do art every time I turned around. I even had, I made my sculpture was a thumb. It was about this big. Do you remember the thumb? So
I remember when I got a Band-Aid too.
Yeah, when it broke, it got a Band-Aid. I think all that's left now is just a little piece of plaster with the thumbnail, your lines there from the print. What kind of print do I want to call that? Tell me in the comments what kind of prints. Yeah. Hey, like our channel.
Oh yeah, like
our channel and give us ideas of if you'd like to hear more of our stories. Because we think this would be fun for us to get together and do.
And she's got a lot of art that we can go through. And I asked all the questions. We got one right over there if we have time.
Yeah, we do have one over here because I'm getting ready to go do a program next week. It's going to be exciting, and I'm working on. It's about 3/4 finished. This one will be stories about my Tucker family down in I came from Southeast. They came from Southwest Missouri.
The South.
The South. Well, no, they don't consider themselves Southern.
Right, but we claim that as Southern because we like our Southern roots.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
It comes out in our drawl every once in a while.
Oh, yes.
I think that's a good transition because I think this is one of the motivating points of your story especially is taking your love and passion, almost having it die several times, but making it such a side hustle, not just to bring in money, but to, I would say, waking people up to the history and the facts and to the story that is always going, because your art, while painting and sculpture has taken on many forms, what has carried you through? I think of the mission statements, and you've came up with several lots of years, but you have been driven by several things, not just a passion for art, but driven to do things. Well, can you go into a little bit of that?
Okay. Well, I'll never forget, and I know a lot of people out in the audience would know the same thing. I'll never forget that day that 9/11 happened. I could tell a number of stories about that day because I was actually in the classroom about to get ready to teach that day. And my husband and I had just been to a conference in St. Louis that weekend. And it was Mark Victor Hansen. And you may not recognize the name, but you probably recognize his books, Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And he says, "You are born for a purpose and a time." So I've just been to this lecture that this man is telling me I'm born for a purpose and time, and I need 100-year goals, and all that kind of stuff has just filled my head with it. And I go home and 9/11 happens. The building gets hit with the airplane, and I will never forget that. It wasn't the night it happened. It was the next. I believe it was the next day. I'd have to look at. It was a Wednesday. I had a flash of a picture in my head, a painting in my head.
Not to interrupt you, but I think this is important in a discussion too, is the creative burden sometimes an artist has. Because I get these flashes too, and sometimes it's a whole story, sometimes it's one scene in a story, sometimes it's a picture. You get these, don't you?
I do.
And if you don't get them out, it's a problem.
It is.
So
it is.
If you have these I hate to call them visions, but if you get these inspirational points, if you get these thoughts, these creative things, get them out. They're there for multiple reasons, but I had to.
And that's a good. That's a
even
good
if it's
point.
bad. I'm the firstborn, and if it's not perfect the first time, it's worth throwing away in the trash.
It's
but
true.
I have had to learn that you still have to write it. It still has to get from out here. It still has to get from in here to out here.
Yeah. Well, and I just, it's just like we're regular on Wednesday night church service, and I was supposed to go, and I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I had a piece of watercolor paper, and I taped it to my door, and I got out the watercolors, and I immediately started drawing the main building there, those towers, and then I started being overwhelmed with the emotions. Now here I live in Missouri, and I'm overwhelmed with the emotions that are going on out there. But one thing is, you know, it drew it closer. This guy was in college, and he called me in the middle of the day in my schoolroom. Well, you just didn't do that back then. You know, he called the cell phone. I'm like, he's like, Mom, how's my uncle? How's my uncle?
Yeah.
Because my brother was actually supposed to be in the Pentagon that day. And he's going, Mom, and I'm like, I'm in the classroom, I'm trying to teach. I don't know. I was like, call your grandparents. So he did, and he found out, and my brother actually his trip had gotten canceled. So we were thankful for that, because he actually knew some people that were killed that day. But I also had a student in my classroom that they called her to the office that morning. Her father was a pilot of the airline where the plane was taken down.
Man.
Now, her father was not on that plane, and so he was calling her to tell her he was all right, but it was his airline.
Yeah.
It was his airline.
Your heart stops, your breath stops at those moments.
Yes, because you experience the emotion of your children.
Yeah.
You know, whether they be your personal children or whether they be, you know, the children that you are teaching. So that began these, you know, I've done art. All my life I've done art. I did art in college. Every time I turned around, I did art. But that just did something for me. Those flashes started coming, and then I had to put together, I did about 60 paintings. Now you have to remember, I've told them yet, but I'm an art teacher, elementary.
Yeah, we haven't gotten into this whole specifics.
Yeah, so that's another story, you know. But I'm an elementary art teacher, and or was till I retired. And so my art over all these years hasn't developed, but to an elementary style. You know, I did the stuff I had to do to go to college, and then all of a sudden, you know, all of my producing is elementary art. Elementary art. So that's a lot like mine, and I will never forget my student teacher that came not too long after that time. And he said to me, he looked at him and he said, "Well, it's just folk art. That's your genre." And I'm like, "It's what? What?" We never got to that part. And you know, in the college, we studied all those old masters and stuff. And I was like, folk art. Yeah. Oh, that's it. Like, what's her name? That mother. Oh shucks, I forgot her name. You might have somebody in the comments could tell me what her name is. That she didn't start painting until she was old.
Oh, okay.
You know, and I was like, oh, okay. So he started me in on that it was okay, that as an adult I would do this. And then all of a sudden, more and more came. Well, then at some point I'm working on my master's. I did complete that. Oh, yeah, what?
Well, no, you can chase every rabbit. Don't worry about it. And we don't have to tell the whole story now. We can save some for another episode.
Well, I did donate. I did one that I called No Faces, which was the ground zero view. And I donated that to a local nonprofit. It was actually just a copy. I still have the original. But I made I had a guy make a copy for me out of the really good paper. And that auctioned for $330. And I thought, who was that that's painting was that? I don't know that person. One time somebody told me I was in a master's class, and somebody said, "Well, you're not that much of an artist." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. You know, have you ever auctioned off a painting for $330?" And they just looked at me like, "What?" Well, I gave this painting away, and they auctioned it for $330. So I don't know how to count that.
Yeah, and they say a lot of the distinction is just levels of less and less people have done the same as you. You know. You've been trained. So many people really are trained besides elementary school. You've seen that through you got into college. You've been paid for your art. There's not a lot of people that can say that, you know, unless they've gone to craft shows.
Well, and you know, you bring up so many stories when you start getting me talking here. So the other thing is, you know, we come how many years since 9/11? This was, this was right before I moved to Blue Springs. To near Columbia, Missouri, and this man calls me, and he says, "Are you Sarah Poff?" And I was like, "Yes." He's like, "Well, I've got something that belongs to you, probably." And I'm like, you know, you've heard about those people that clean out storage bins They'll buy one, purchase one. That's what he had done. He had done that. And in it was my painting that had been auctioned off.
I haven't heard this one. So you got your painting back?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay, you did not.
I did not. But remember, I still have the original.
Yeah, well, I know you had the original.
Yeah.
Because it'd be hilarious if you got the copy. So we didn't get it back.
So what he did is, he had found my name on the back. I put my name and my phone number and stuff on the back. And I didn't have money to get him really like that artistic like license and stuff like that on it. So what I had them do is I had somebody notarize it for me. And so everybody thinks that's pretty cool. So I don't know, it isn't notarized.
Yet again, distinctions that you make along your process that make you unique. I mean, having a name, having a moniker, having things official.
So his next thing was, he's like, I was going to see if maybe I could sell this or give it to somebody. Yeah. He says, but the more I look at it, now since I've been talking to you, I think I'm just going to hang it up in my house. I was like, this is cool. I was like, well, if you decide to sell it, maybe I should think about it, you know? He hasn't never called back, so, but it was a cool moment.
Definitely. So, we've chased some great rabbits, but maybe in starting to close it down and coming back to the thought of like the mission statement. Because I've heard some and few, because we are a family of telling stories and keeping the traditions alive. And I know that's been, at least in your later years, more part of your theme and anthem.
Yeah. So nowadays I do a lot of folk art, but it's changed somewhat. As I told you about my sculpture I won the prize on, that has to do with my DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution. It tells my story all the way back to my patriot in 1701. My grandmother, my Thompson grandmother, my mother's mother, she was always sitting in her chair because she couldn't walk very good. But she told us stories. She told us stories of the family all the way back. She said, we have a Revolutionary War ancestor. So I didn't know what to do with that, except that that's what she said. And then later, after she died, I was sad that I wasn't old enough and didn't get anything written down. And come to find out, my uncle had written her stories down. So we have a copy of that. We
need scribes out there. You don't have to be creative, but writing and documenting the story is a part of this for sure.
And that is for sure. And so then, we come forward, and my son and my daughter, they're old enough, they don't need me as much. And I decided I want to pursue the Daughters of the American Revolution because Grandma said I had one. So I got this little paper and I started like going, well, I think I need to figure this out. And then I got somebody that, knew more about genealogy than me and told me what I needed to do to find my proofs. And we eventually did prove that she was right, that I had someone, but it wasn't the person she thought it was. She kind of gotten some of the names mixed up over time. There was a thread of truth in all this that was written down, but it certainly wasn't just that. Well, and then as I was going through the Daughters of the American Revolution and learning about them, and I know some people think that they're maybe a little more uppity, but they believe in the things that I believe in as far as it goes with our country and our God. Our family, country, God, our God, country, family, our God family. I better put you second, huh? After the Lord, and then our country. And so as I learned more of those stories and I started putting more down and started doing more folk art, all this time I'm working on folk art, all the kind of craziness from folk art. And there's a bunch more we could go into some of that other folk art, maybe we will, if you like it. And then, I just became obsessed with the fact that God was leading me to talk about history, and talk about, my history, about history that I learned, so that we could learn about the freedoms that we have because of those who've come before us. Those who have come before us. And so my mission is just to go around and talk about history anywhere, any place I can. I want freedom. I want freedom for our country.
Yeah.
Oh boy, do I want freedom for our country. And so I work super hard. Sometimes I'll go like, I'm just tired. I'm really tired. And then I rest a little while and God gives me more drive, sends me more people that are enthusiastic about their story, about their story that weaves within the story of our nation. And that's what I like to bring to the table. And if you've got a story, I'd love to hear it. Write in the comments, ask for my email, and I will look at your story. Because what I like to do is I like to find a story that strikes me emotionally. My favorite ones to do are someone who was close to someone who was famous. Because I think that is what we need to remember. It took us, the commoners, to make all these happen. I always say, see, it's my Henry. One of these days I'll show you my Henry. I have a little wooden figure, and I call him Henry. My patriot for the AR is Henry Haynes. He was born in 1701 and 1784, and I can tell you the whole line all the way down, but I won't do that today. My granddaughter can actually do it now. I bribed her. I gave her some money to do it. She can do it, and she's 7 years old. So, anyway, you know, it's about passing on this torch of our free country. You know, we enjoy these freedoms. We want these freedoms to go on past us.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And so my mission is to do that. And of course, a religious freedom is my most important freedom that I want.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, maybe in concluding and wrapping up, John put a little bit of his flavor in there too, is, you know, keeping the story alive. I mean, like, I've seen that multiple generations on both sides of my family. You know, there are great and big stories and moments. There are small little moments that make it too. There are moments of change. You know, and like you talked about, the rallying around people. We've forgotten that good is sometimes so easy to reach out and encourage in our society. And I think that is one of the great services that you have paid over the years to so many communities. You've taught for years. You've been active and inspiring others.
I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm doing what the Lord told me to do.
I understand, but it's still a point of a little love and encouragement, and I can document it.
Now, that's what he's wanting. He's wanting me to make sure that I know that he knows that I didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely back and forth. But maybe to conclude this session, what has been your most favorite painting to make so far?
Oh my word!
I shouldn't eliminate your favorite art project. Painting is too limited.
Oh, painting is too limited.
That way we can tease another one later on. Because like one of my favorites is the violin she did.
Oh, the violin. Which one?
True, very true. But I love the matriarchs that you've done. You know, but what has been your favorite for any reason? And you can just say I don't want to say.
I don't know. You know, they each have a special place in my heart. But the violin I assume you're talking about the Civil War violin.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the Civil War violin, that's when I was taking classes. You know, I'm an old teacher, and so teachers have to keep going back to school, going back to school, going back to school. Well, I had my master's.
Good students just stay learning.
That's
and they
true.
find their ways of learning.
That's true. Well, that's true.
You are a good student.
I don't know how good a student I was when I was going through, but I love learning. So I remember how obsessed I became with the Civil War stories. I was taking a course. It was during that anniversary of the Civil War. I was taking a course at the National Frontier Trails Museum about the Civil War. And we were learning about what happened. And I began to learn the personal stories. The personal stories on the border of Missouri and Kansas. And that border war that took 10 years before the Civil War even started. And how awful it was, how awful people treated each other. One of the lines I remember reading is one of the ladies was talking about she was walking from Lexington all the way to Independence with her children, and she saw one of her friends over there who really needed help and needed she had her children, but she wasn't feeling good. She's like, and I don't even have strength to go help her. And so I began to learn these personal stories of different people, and I was so awestruck of that common person who was part of the Civil War, who did weave in. And I just started wanting to not only tell my family stories, but tell these stories of these people and their personal events that happened. And so I have a violin that I have painted those on. I have two different ones. One I gave to the Northland Symphony in Kansas City, and they auctioned it off for $375. And then I made one that had some other different stories, but still stories, because I gave the rights to the person who bought the violin. And it just, those stories just still are with me and still are awestruck of the battles those people went through, and the fact that at that point, not even a friend could help a friend, because you were afraid if that friend was too associated with the side the other person didn't like, they were going to get in trouble. Yeah. So that's the violin. But I don't know that the favorite one personally would be my grandma's story and my sculpture. But because I've made others now that are generational, right now I'm working on one and I'm letting my granddaughters help me.
Oh yeah, it's been fun to see the journey.
So it's actually about my Tucker side. So
and they're not grown yet, granddaughters for you. You may not know who her granddaughters are right now.
Yeah, they painted themselves, and and so it's been interesting. But I think someday they'll be going when their mother and you decide to make a barn. I think they're gonna just take my paintings out in the backyard in my on the land that my son-in-law and daughter own. They're gonna just go back there and have a bonfire.
Well, we're still hoping that one of these granddaughters will run the museum, but
one of them says she'll run my museum, but right now we
don't know yet.
She says, "Well, Grandma, you won't know because you'll be dead." I was like, "Okay." Yeah. She says, "You are going to leave some money for this." I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I don't have any money to leave."
You've definitely given us legacy, and pointing to that the story goes on besides where we leave off the page.
Yes, that's true.
And maybe in conclusion, like what would you tell that budding artist that is like, it's hard right now to do my art, it's hard to be wearing the hats that I am and still pursuing my passions? What might you encourage them with?
I'll try to make time for it, even if it's just a few minutes. Keep it on your list. I mean, that's what I would say, because I've had it on my list. This one I'm working on right now, I've had it on my list for some time, and just the other day it hit me. Somebody wanted a program about how I create art from the stories I learned, and I was like, oh my gosh. And it's down, this program's going to be down close to where I have 4 generations of my family left, and I was like, oh, it's time to do the painting. So I had to start it out. So if you can do a drawing. I mean, I have lots of drawings of starts of stories, and if I even just look at those, it'll bring that back.
Yeah.
Maybe not as strong as it was then, but it's still there. And so just scribble it down, write it down, paint a little bit of something that will remind you of it, and just keep it on your list. Keep telling yourself you're going to make time for it, and just try to do it. Sometimes with some of these extra things, you just gotta step in it and just do it. Even if you do have to stay up late.
Even if you have to stay up late. Well, I think that'll close out our first session of Under the Hat, and we look forward to seeing everybody back here again for more stories.
I love that title you came up with, son. You are so creative.
I can put some words together. I got that.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.